Welcome to Baking Specialty Breads with Master Baker John Savanna. Together with the Mill Pond Bakery located in Munich, Michigan, John will prepare and help you understand the secrets behind some of the world's most appreciated and sought-after breads. Many great bakers keep their recipes far from the public eye, but with over 20 years of experience, John Savanna is ready to give you the key to baking specialty breads.
Okay, my name is John Savanna, and my wife and myself started Mill Pond Bakery in 1980. When we started, I was a chef for 4 years, and I market gardened after becoming a chef. And during that time, after the summer and into the fall, we sold at the Ann Arbor Farmers Market. And we decided that having cooking experience and being in the kitchen, that maybe we could bake. And we baked at home to start with, had taken it to the market, and we found out that we were really on to something good because we'd stay up all night long, and by 10:30 in the morning, we'd sell out. So from that, I decided to pursue the idea of being a baker, and with the idea still of maybe growing vegetables in the summertime. So for the first 2 years, we spent basically just trying to get a kitchen together, and I live in Waterloo, Michigan, and so I rented a space in Waterloo, and from that I built a kitchen from scratch. I basically had an idea and a dream. I had no money. I borrowed $1,000 and proceeded to buy a bench, an oven, and hook up the kitchen and the sinks and proceed from that idea. From the 21 years of being in the kitchen, I made a lot of mistakes, and I basically have made a lot of very good recipes over time. We started out making cookies and pretzels, and we now make 2,500 loaves of bread a week. 40 different varieties, all from scratch, all my own recipes. That's just a little bit of background. So in that time, I'm now realizing that what I need to do is maybe pass some of this knowledge that I've gained along to other people that want to bake. And I guess what I'll do now is to show you basically how to make a simple dough. We'll make the sourdough French first, and we'll proceed from basic ingredients at the mixer: flour, water, salt, and the culture. The culture I have is, it came from California. It's over 100 years old. Thinking about the gold rush and people making sourdough in California, there was a number of ways it may have came into California. One of the ways could be from people like coming from Michigan and actually bringing their, they called it neighborhood yeast around here, where the people would pass the sourdough along to one another as neighbors. And someone would bake one week and then pass it to their neighbor, and then it was passed on to another neighbor. And so when people left Michigan and went into California, then they may have brought that sourdough with them. The other idea that I've had is that the Mexicans owned politically California, and that in the early 1800s, Napoleon set up his brother Maximilian in Mexico to be the emperor there, and they brought a lot of French over, which were very good bread bakers, and they probably brought their sourdough over with them. And so there's a good chance it traveled up from Mexico into California, and they started making sourdough, which has been a long tradition. So the sourdough that I have could have a very long life to it, much longer than just 100 years, which has always fascinated me, because being a baker, you come in and you do your work day in, day out, and from time to time you flash back on the fact that you're now in a long tradition of bread makers, and it goes back a long, long time, and that feels good. The culture that I have, I'll slide you can see it's bubbly, and it's in this crock here, and it has a strong vinegar-like smell to it. I feed it flour and water, nothing else, and it'll rise up overnight and then fall. What I do is, we call this the mother or the chef. You take from this, you add, we have buckets here. We recycle our molasses buckets, honey buckets. I'll add flour and water overnight, and I had 1 gallon of water and 2 scoops, which is 3 pounds, 4 ounces of flour for each scoop, so that's 6 pounds, 8 ounces, and mix that up so it's kind of a thick paste, and so it'll rise slowly. And the culture, basically, it's microorganisms living together in a healthy city, basically. Multicultured, that's why it's culture. And as long as they're healthy and you take care of them, if you're not going to bake for 3 or 4 days, you need to put it in the cooler to slow everything down. There's been times when I first started, I almost lost the culture by leaving it out over the weekend, and it got really warm in the summertime, July, August, and it would rise up, and luckily I had other culture in the cooler, and I could start it up again. But the smell goes off. I bake bread with it. It rises halfway, but not fully. The taste is okay, but it's just not healthy compared to making good bread from the culture. So last night, I'll slide this back down. I mixed up the culture, and what I'm going to do now is add the culture to the mixer here. Okay, what I'm going to do, I added the bucket of culture. I'm going to add 16 pounds, 8 ounces of flour, and I'm also going to add 1 gallon of water. So, and these we can change the ratio a bit, but that's what I'm doing right now. So let's see. The water should be cold for sourdough. You can warm it up slightly to get it to move a little bit quicker, but basically you don't want it too warm because it'll move too fast. Basically you want the sourdough to rise slowly to develop flavor. So this is the gallon of water. I have salt measured out here. I use sea salt. Basically it's just natural salt from the sea. If you're ever by the sea, 4/5 of the ocean is, or 4/5 of Earth is ocean, so the sea salt is just the natural byproduct of that. The flour is wheat flour, and what I'm going to do is, this is the scale. I have 2 here. We'll just use one of them. That's a scoop. This is the counterbalance for the scoop. This is a 10-pound weight, and what I need right now is 16 pounds, 8 ounces. So the scoop will hold 15 pounds. And, so I'll just weigh 10 pounds, and I'll come back and weigh 6 pounds, 8 ounces. When you start to get a lot of flour, you just take your scoop and push it down, and you can add more flour to the scoop here. So you just weigh it. There's ounces below. I've got a little bit of ounces there. We'll take that off. So that's 10 pounds. The flour itself can change when they mill it at different times of year. There's more moisture, there's less moisture. So after it's mixed, we'll test it out. We can always adjust the flour or the water at that point. Now I need 6 pounds, so I've got a 4-pound weight and a 2-pound weight and 8 ounces below here. So this will be the 16/8 that I need. Roll up the mixer. That after mixing the dough for about 8 minutes, I'm going to add the salt now. And by adding the salt at the end rather than in the beginning, then that allows the dough fermentation, the sourdough to start to rise in there, and it creates a good texture. So I'll add the salt now, which will slow down the yeast or the sourdough, and but it's what develops flavor also. But it does slow down the rising a bit, so it's nice to add it at the end. So once I add the salt, I'm going to add a little bit of water and a little bit more flour. Mixing doughs in the morning for the first time, it's kind of like farming. You add the yeast or the sourdough, and then you add your flour and your water, and you're making the wheat grow basically into bread. So it's interesting how wheat starts out, and farmers grow it, and then bakers grow it, and it changes form. After I added the water and the salt and a little bit of flour. We'll let it mix another minute or two. Then I'll stop the mixer and run the dough on my hands. And at this point, no matter what the recipe says, that's what I'm saying about the flour changes. There's different moisture content. After doing that day in, day out, mixing doughs, you can adjust it at this point, which will make a big difference changing it here than finding out it's too late once you have it on the bench after it rises slowly in the bowls, fermenting. And then 2 hours later you take it and you find out that it's too loose, correct it right here. So you can stop a lot of problems from happening at this point. The sourdough French has been fermenting for 2 hours, and I'm going to take it to the bench right now and start to shape different loaves. Cut some of the dough out. You can see the structure in there, the cellular structure of the dough and how it's rising. Basically what's happening when we started out, we started with flour, water, the culture, and salt. And as it's been slowly fermenting, what goes on in all doughs is the fact that the sugars, and in this particular case we don't have sugar, no honey, no sugars, all we have is the starch from the wheat. The culture is feeding on the sugars and starches in the dough. And what happens then is it throws off a carbon dioxide, a gas. And the gas then gets trapped in the gluten. And when we knead dough, which is something along, well, I put that dough right in front here. When you're kneading like this is what you're doing. You're hand kneading by hand. Mixer's doing the same thing. You're creating gluten. And that gluten strands in that dough is from the protein. That's where the gluten is coming from. Once the strands start to grow together, the carbon dioxide that's escaping from the sugars and the starch, the yeast feeding on the sugars and starch, the carbon dioxide is now trying to get out and expand, and it gets trapped in the gluten strands. And so that's what causes the dough to rise properly. The salt kind of slows that down a bit, the expansion, but it's also developing flavor, and that's why I added it when I was mixing at the very end. And so for right now, what I'm going to do is to cut these doughs, the dough itself, out into different shapes. So this is a bench scraper. The scale is set at 1 pound. I'll make 1 pound 3. There's different shapes that you can make out of the dough. What we'll do is to cut a piece of dough out like this, and I'll cut several out. Handy tool, becomes an extension of my hand. This one has a sharp piece of metal, stainless steel, rosewood handle, 2 rivets through it. It's not flimsy, it's sturdy and strong. Okay, I'll cut out 6. Yeah, that's good. Okay, these shapes in particular, what I'll do is flatten the dough out, fold it a third, grab the 2 ends of the dough and fold them in, so I now have a square. And from that square, I'll now fold it a third again and then roll it up so that it's tight. What I'm doing is giving the raw dough a little bit of memory on which direction it's going to have to go. It's going to grow out this way. If you try to shape it all at one time, the dough rips and tears. So what you have to do is to shape it, give it a little coaxing, let it rest, and then come back to it. So I'll shape 6 of these like this. I'll do it pretty quick, and then we'll go on and do something else. We'll let them rest in the boxes here. That's what these are, proofing boxes, to let it rise slowly. So these are going to be small 1-pound loaves. I make a 2-pound loaf called a batard in French. It's a longer loaf. We make a French baguette that's sourdough out of this dough. It'll weigh 1 pound, 1 ounce, and it's long. And we'll also make hard rolls out of it. Hard rolls being there's no shortening in there, it's just flour, water, and salt. So the dough has a hard, crisp crust on the outside and soft, tender crumb inside. So these are the 6 1-pounders. I'll move these to this wood box here. Let them proof up. Take out this corn mill. Okay, what I'll do is lightly flour the inside of the box. I'm going to cover it with a piece of canvas so it doesn't dry out on the top. Now I'm going to cut dough out for a baguette, which will be 1 pound, 1 ounce. A little bit more. We'll do 3 baguettes. Same idea. You can round, what you're doing is you're getting the bread dough to go out this way. If I take I'll cut one more and let's see, 1 pound, 1 ounce. And if I fold it like this and knead it all into the center, then that dough, its tendency is it's going to become a round and it's going to want to grow completely in a circle, like so. So what we're after is the baguette shape, and we want to encourage the dough to go out like this, and we want a good looking loaf of bread, so we make them long. You don't have to fold them inside. You could roll them up like this also, just to encourage the bread dough to be heading in that direction. I'm going to do a 2 pound batard, which is long. Will weigh 2 pounds, 5 ounces. We always add extra weight to the dough. If we want to have a 1 pound loaf, we weigh them out at 1 pound 3 because they lose moisture in the oven. The 2 pound loaf could be 2, 3, but we found that it looks better if it has a couple more ounces added to it. So I've usually gone heavier on some of the breads just because of the fact that they do look a lot nicer. So I'll shape 3 at 2.5. A little heavy. And I'll make it 4. The other thing about the scale is if you're weighing a piece of dough out and you put it on a scale and it doesn't go down right away, lightly tap it and you kind of can get an estimate of how much dough to add. And so what you do is you take a piece of dough and you throw it on there and you can tell, not quite enough. Try that, and it's slightly going down. If you get too much on there and you want to, I'll slide that off 5 ounces. What you do is you put your hand on the dough itself on the scale and just pull it loose until you, and then lightly. right there. Okay, on these, we'll, making a batard, we'll shape it so that it's in the same direction as the baguette and 1 pound loaf. I'll do 3 like this, and then I'll come back and I'm going to weigh a few more off at 2.5, and what we're going to do is to put them in baskets. They're going to rise slowly in the basket. Slide these into the box, cover them, put another box out. The other thing about using the bench scraper, when you cut your dough, you bring it out into an angle, then you can cut one whole strip off of that dough. Once you have one weighing at your weight, let's see, that was 2 pounds, I want 2.5. I need to add a little bit here. Okay, I can see what that one looks like, and then the next one I'll cut according to size. I might cut another one without throwing it on the scale yet, and another one. And then what I'll do is I'll lightly tap it, and then it goes down, then throw another one on, and it's just much quicker to do a series of them than one at a time. That one's a little heavy. Just a little bit more. Okay. 4, 5, one more. Good. Okay, with this we'll round them up, and it's just like kneading. You bring your hands in, and you're turning the dough a quarter of a turn, and you're pushing with your palms of your hands here against the bench, and you're using your hips more than your shoulders. And you just turn a quarter of a turn, turn, turn. Then once you have the round shape, you kind of use this part of your hand right in through here of the palm, push against the bench, and just finish shaping it up slowly until it looks pretty round to you. That's the bottom. And so now when we put it into a basket to rise slowly, I have baskets over here, what we'll do is one at a time. I have a rye flour and wheat mixture here together for the top. What I'll do is take this and lightly flour the basket inside. Then that loaf that I said, this is the bottom, you're putting the top down and the bottom is now up. And what we're going to do is put that into the proofing boxes and let that rise. So I've got 6 of them here. I'll round them up. These baskets are inexpensive Chinese baskets. They cost about 30 cents a piece. The Muslim canvas I've had for 17 years. I had my wife's grandmother sew them up for me. So they were sesame seed bags, and so they work quite well. You can, if you have a little bit of linen or muslin, it's easy enough to make your own cloches. So lightly flour. The other way to go is there's this kind of basket, which is coil, and people in Europe use baskets like these. These are made out of wood, but traditionally they use rye straw and would coil the rye straw around in a circle. And the same thing, they would flour the inside, and then as they rise slowly, and the one is just a circle, the other one has a little design in front, and so we'll put 2 loaves into these coil baskets, and you have a little bit of a design. It's a form before metal, before the industrial age, people used wicker instead of metal pans, or baked freeform. Let's see here. A little bit of rye flour and wheat mixture to go into the baskets. Also, I have this stamp which you can stamp breads with. This one says Mill Pond, which is the name of the bakery. So after it rises up, you can just press it down into the dough, and it then says Mill Pond. Okay. Okay, this is a Mill Pond stamp. And right, and after it rises up, it'll double in volume, and you'll just push down on it, and if there's enough flour here, we might be able to see it. Yeah, it's a little hard to see, but it says Mill Pond, and it'll stamp the dough. Okay. Cover that up. Okay, I have a press that cuts out, it's called the Duchess, and it presses out a piece of dough into 36 even pieces. So what I do then is to scale off a piece of dough at 4 pounds, 8 ounces. I need to get a 4-pound weight. There. Okay, I'm ready to make hard rolls out of the sourdough French. I've pressed it down into this is a 4-pound 8-piece. I pressed them down to either I can make small ones or I'll put 2 together, and in this particular case I'll put 2 together, and I'm going to make sourdough French hard rolls. I'll pull 2 off of each one. Another thing that you could do is once you press out a piece like that and you get 36 pieces, you could actually just pull them apart when they come out, and you can round them up or you can make them long. And rounding them up is something along this line where you take 2 and you press down hard on the bench. There's a little bit too much flour here. That makes it harder to round, but you can wet the bench down to compensate for that. Okay, little round ones. Now what I'll do, this is actually the shape I want right here, is I'm flattening them out, and it's just like making a small loaf of bread. I fold it a third. I'm using my thumbs to press against it and seal the seam. And so now I can narrow down the tips a little bit, and that's the shape that I want. And what I'm going to do is then, after shaping all, well, the 36, because I'm using 2, will become 18, and then we'll put them on a board with cornmeal and let them rise. We'll cover them with canvas. I think what I'll do is just shape maybe 8 or 9 of them, and then I'll toss some of this dough over to Gary and Al and let them shape the rest of them into small hard rolls for the... Okay, this is the one with the canvas, and the 2-pound loaves we'll let set there, and these I'll reshape. These are the 1-pounders that I worked a little bit earlier. Flatten it out, fold it over, kind of bring in that center so it's now forming kind of a triangle. Fold the center in, press it down so that the seam is sealed. Keep the seam down, take my thumbs and push against the seam, and I work my hands out, and I'm not really pushing against the dough to pull it out. I'm just kind of sealing it and then bringing my hands out slowly, and then that's the shape that you want right there. And what we'll do is shape a few of them, and then I'll put cornmeal down on the bottom of the box and let them proof in there. Seal it, roll it with keep my two thumbs together, roll it back and forth, seal it, then I'm tucking these tips in. You can twist like this to get each end down so that it's more pointed, much more traditional shape. Looks like a large cigar. Seal it. While I'm waiting, I'll put these and put them underneath the cover here. Bring them in, not just flat out. Bring the center in, seal it. Like I said, all I'm doing is pushing with my thumbs down against the bench and just slowly working my hands out. I don't want a really long baguette loaf. When I do the baguette shortly here, you'll see that's when I actually start to manipulate the dough to force it out going this way. The dough feels really good. It's soft. It's been rising for about 2.5 hours, 3 hours now. Starting to have air bubbles inside. It should make really good tasting bread. Okay, put them in with cornmeal. We'll let them rise for about an hour, hour and a half. This is the batard, which is a lot longer. Pardon? Oh, okay. So once again, it's like the small one, but now I want to get this loaf out in each direction going to the left and to the right of me. So I'm turning the whole loaf over. I'm sealing it tight here. I'm also going to seal the top now. So I'm pushing that down also. Now I'm picking the loaf up so it's not sticking to the bench. Take the center, fold it over. Taking this end, same thing, sealing it along the edge, along the seam. So I'm doing the same thing. I'm taking my thumbs now, pushing against that seam, and now I'm rolling it back and forth because I want it to be long. And that's a good size right there for a batard. I have a 2-pound long sourdough French. I'll do the same with this one. I have 3 of them. Seal. All the air's out. It's nice and tight. I'm going to take my thumbs, push against the seam, work it back and forth. Once I have it out, that's the second time. Now I'm going to take my hands and gently work the dough out. Not force it, but just gently. I can feel the dough underneath my hands as I'm moving until it comes out. And you can see it's that much longer. A little further. I get to the end, and I want them to be a little bit more narrow. I'll take one hand and twist, take the other hand and twist the other way. Just 2 or 3 times like that, and it narrows it right down. I need one more. Fold it over, press the air out. I can flip it upside down like this. This is another technique. And then push all the air out, and then just fold it over again. Seal it. And then I just rock it back and forth until I'm bringing it out. It's still not out quite far enough, and so then now I'll just spread my hands out flat like this, and then just work it right along. And I'm not pushing hard, I'm just pushing gently. I can feel the dough going out. It's being responsive because it's rested and it's relaxed. And if it's tight and stiff, then you just cover it with the canvas. Go do something else, come back in 5 minutes, and then it'll go right out for you. So we've got 3. The other one is the baguette, which it's really the same technique. It's just thinner. You bring it out, fold it in half. So now, same thing. I'm going to spread my hands out. I'm going to go back and forth. And now if I have high spots or low spots, which I can tell right now in the dough that I have a high spot here and one there, just work those spots at first until you hold your hands back, take a look at it, come back here, come back here, and you can see that the dough is just gently going right on out. And that's just about the size right there that you want. So we'll put these, make a couple more baguettes, and then we'll put these on boards with cornmeal, let them rise, cover them with canvas, and then we'll start working on the Italian dough. Move over here. One more. The baguette traditionally is, when you get ready to put it in the oven, you slice it 7 times. You can slice it 6 times, but 7 is traditional. They should be long enough to have those 7 equal cuts across the top. Okay, what I'll do is put this away, a little bit of canvas. I've got a board over here with cornmeal. I can put the baguettes on. These. One more canvas. We're ready to make the Italian dough right now, and out of the Italian we're going to get French bread and Italian. It's called plain ordinary dough because there's just 4 basic ingredients: flour, water, salt, and yeast. The water is 1 gallon of water, and it should be 75 to 78 degrees temperature. The flour should be 15 pounds of flour, and the salt is 4 tablespoons. And the yeast is a half a pound. You can take that dough, that primarily make about 15 to 20 loaves of bread, depending on the size. What I've done is mixed a 3-gallon batch, same ingredients. I've used 3 gallons of water, 12 tablespoons of salt, and 46 and a half pounds of flour. I've let it rise 2 hours in a bowl. It's fermenting slowly, and from that it's ready now to take to the bench, and we're going to make different doughs out of it. The dough itself, I need to cut it out, and need a knife. No, I need one of those knives right there will work. Great, thank you, Gary. And a little flour, which is back here. Lightly dust the bench. A cloud of flour. Out of this dough, we're going to do some different shapes. The Italian is going to be both in a 1 pound size and also a 1.5 pounds. The French is a pound. We'll weigh it off at 1.14 pounds, but basically it is going to be like 1.75 pounds. It'll weigh 1.12 pounds coming out of the oven. We're going to do focaccia, which is using these ingredients were mixed together. Gary and Al just mixed all these fresh ingredients. We have scallions and a little bit of garlic, some dried basil from the summertime. Smells real good. Fresh tomatoes. So I'll mix all these up together. We got some onions grown locally. Basil was grown locally. I try to use as many local ingredients as possible, and kind of ties us into our sense of place, our area. The basil will sprinkle in, and just kind of mix all these together like a huge salad. This can vary from season to season. During the summertime, I usually add rosemary and sage. I might add purple onion instead of white onion. I got scallions right now. This is a pretty good mix, right, like it is. So I'll set these off to the side. Sorry. Still have some greenery on my fingers. Okay, I'm going to need this scale. Okay, thank you. And 1 pound weight. I'll slide this over here. Okay, what I'll do is cut out the French bread first because it's going to rest. Cut a swath of dough here. We'll throw it up here. I'm going to weigh it off at 114, 1 pound, 14 ounces. Toss it over to the side. A little heavy, so let's see here. Well, the 3 French is good for right now to show you what we're doing. And I'll immediately shape them to let them rest. So I'm shaping them into a log form, both to the left and to the right, trying to get it to grow in that direction. 1/3 over across the top. Pick up the 2 ends, which I say pick up the ears, put the ears together, fold it 1/3, and then roll it up. And you should be gentle enough with the dough so that it doesn't rip the top of the dough. If I'm real tight with it, and that's what happens. It'll start to rip along there, and then the dough structure, you start losing it, and it'll start rising and then continue to rip in that direction. So what you're trying to do is to shape it in the direction that you want to form a good loaf, and then and be gentle enough with it, not too tight, but yet you can still be kind of rough with that dough. And as long as you're watching what you're doing, the dough is smooth and silky. If it starts to rip, you stop and just don't go any further. You got to let it relax, and you can come back to it in about 5 minutes. So right now I've got the 3 shaped. We'll cover these. Now what I'll do is I'll cut out some, the focaccia ingredients are made. I'll cut out the dough to make the focaccia. Will weigh 1 pound, 2 ounces. Toss that piece up there. I'm lightly tapping the scale, watching it go down. So now what I'll do is weigh out. Lightly tap it to see how much dough I need to add. I've got 4 so far. 5. 5's good. And then what I'll do is to flatten these out. A little bit of flour on the bench. Dusting. Okay, flatten with my hand. Use my knuckles, flat part of my palms, just to kind of push it out. I'm not stretching and tearing the dough. I'm just flattening it out. And now what I want to do is to just toss it up here and let it relax, just like I'm letting the French bread relax. And I'll come back to it in about 5 to 10 minutes. Depending on the temperature of the room, it'll let me know how soon it'll be when I can start putting my ingredients inside this dough. I've got 5 pieces of dough for focaccia, and then I'll also make a fougasse. The interesting thing about the two is the fougasse came from France and the focaccia came from Italy. And I was doing the farmer's market one day, and I was making fougasse since I started in the shape of a fan. And there was a gentleman from France, and then there was also a gentleman from Italy. And I said, he was saying, well, what is that? And I said, it's a fougasse. And the Italian gentleman, at about that time, I'd taken the same shape, and I made it into putting my ingredients in for my focaccia inside, and made a fougasse shape. And the other gentleman said, no, that's a focaccia. And so they were talking back and forth, and come to find out that there was the political boundary went right between the two countries, and one village was on one side in France, and the other one was on the other side in Italy. And So basically it was the same bread, and the Italians had added vegetables to it, and the French just left it straight to make it a crusty bread. So then what I'll do now is I'll put a 2-pound weight up there, and these could be different sizes. You can make any size you want. This is going to be a fougasse, and I need, let's say I do 3 pounds, 2 ounces is good. And I think I lost my bench scraper. The dough swallowed it up. Okay. Not heavy enough. Okay. Okay, what I'm going to do, I've got the size that I want. I'm going to round it up. I'm twisting the dough a quarter of a turn and turning it. Bring it into the center, turning it, a quarter of a turn. Bring it to the center, turning it. So that now that it's a round loaf. I'm going to let it rest. What I want to do is to be able to have it, I'll take a rolling pin and roll it out. So for right now it's way too tight because I've tightened all the structure of the bread dough up, and so it's going to have to rest. And I'll do one more. Let me cover the focaccia pieces with a little bit of canvas so it doesn't dry out in the air. Yeah, we just leave that there. We'll set these aside, a little bit of canvas. Okay, now what I'm going to do is I'm going to shape the Italian dough, and I'm going to cut a piece out and make it 1 pound 5 ounces. This will be a 1 pound loaf when it comes out of the oven. Something about the Italian dough, there's a lot of water in the oven, so I'm going to make sure that I have more than enough bread dough there to compensate to make a 1 pound loaf. I'll shape 3 of these, and then we'll do a 1.5 pound loaf, which is 1/12, a little bit larger. If you have a family of 6 or 8 to feed, it's coming over for dinner, this would be a better size loaf. If you just had 3 or 4 in your family, 1 pound loaf would work quite well. The other shape that we're going to do out of the Italian is a panini, which is a small little loaf. Those are going to weigh 10 ounces, so I'll take my 1 pound weight off. I'll slide my scale over to 10 ounces, and I'll scale off 10 ounces, which is that much dough. The paninis are nice because they're similar to the French baguette. You can have them with soup, salad, pasta by cutting them at an angle, or you can actually make a sandwich, a hoagie sandwich out of them, and put salad dressing on and different kind of cold cuts and cheeses. So that's a nice small Italian loaf, the panini. The same with the sourdough French. You can make hard rolls, or you can also make Italian hard rolls. We can weigh them off at 4 ounces, and it's a little heavy here, so let's see, just about that size. And we're going to round these up. These are really wonderful. Hot out of the oven. They're crispy on the outside, soft and tender on the inside. If you have a nice salami, you can just have salami in a hot Italian hard roll, and it's absolutely wonderful. You don't need mayonnaise, you don't need mustard, just the salami and the bread. Okay, I'll do 6 of these, and then I'll round these up. Okay, for the Italian, it's the same thing. You're going to make a round loaf to start out with. So you turn it a quarter of a turn. You bring the dough into the center and turn. Dough into the center and turn. Now I'm taking the bottom part of my palm and pushing against the bench, and I've got the bottom of the loaf that is unformed, and everything else is smooth and silky on the top. And so I'm keeping that bottom down and taking my palm of my hand right through here and just pushing against the bench. Not hard, but enough to force it into a round ball. Another way, another technique that you can use to make a round is, once again, bring a quarter of a turn, bring the top to the center, turn, top to the center, and turn. And once you get it into almost a round at this point, what you can do is take both your hands, cup them, and you just bring the dough forward toward you, and you can kind of feel the dough, you can see it stretching and making a ball. And now you do the same thing here. And now you have a round ball also, using both hands. A little bit of air holes there, I'll punch that out. Now, I can use both hands and do the same thing, when the work can go a little bit quicker. This dough, the French will rise about 10 minutes, and then we'll shape it into actually French bread. This Italian dough will go one more turn. It's fermenting slowly. It fermented once in the bowl. It's now fermenting a second time, and we'll cover it and put it in the boxes and let it rise there for another half hour, and then we'll shape it the final turn in the boxes into Italian loaves. So what I'll do is I'll take the cornmeal that's in the box here, take that out, lightly flour the box. Put these loaves in here to rise slowly, let them rest. They'll double in size. You could let them, once they double, you can come back and shape them. Okay, with the Italian hard rolls, you can do it with one, flattening out just like making a large loaf. Just bring it all to the center. And then, same idea, you're using the bottom of your hand and just pushing against the bench. It's got a little tail here. You just keep going along with that tail until it's round. And once it is, you just tuck the tail into the center. And so you have a hard roll. And it's going to double in size. We're going to put that on a board with cornmeal, and after they double, then we'll slide those into the oven. It'll take about 20 minutes to a half an hour, depending on the temperature in the room. The panini I should shape and let it rest like the French, and then we'll come back and reshape it. We can make baguettes out of this dough, which is quite nice. It's a yeasted dough, just like the sourdough. It's just a little bit different. It rises pretty quick. I'll cut out, let's say, 10 ounces here for a baguette. A little heavy. Okay, we have 3 there. Shape these same way. You're just getting them into a long shape, a log, so you can just roll them up like this, and then set them aside underneath the canvas. Using my thumbs to press against the bottom of the seam and just rolling them up. This dough is really good because it has no sugar, no shortening. It's just a good, ordinary bread, just good food. These are the paninis, so I'm going to shape them like the baguettes. I'll let them set. Got a little bit of parsley there. Okay, I'll move these over to the side. I'll move the scale out of the way, and we'll shape the focaccia next, and I'll just cover these here. I'll put these on a cornmeal board. Canvas. Maybe I'll put the French in a board. These are the two fougasse. I'll set these aside. Cover these. Okay, we'll let these double in size. Gary, you want to take these over and let them rise on a tree rack? Thank you.
Plastic?
Yes, plastic on top. Okay, I'm ready to shape the Italian focaccia right now. I need a little flour and a little dusting across the bench. Flatten it out a little bit more. I'll flatten the rest of them out off to the side while I'm working on one. These are going to continue to relax a little bit. So we can move these up. The ingredients you can change. I had a lady come to the market again when I first started making them, and she was from Italy, and she was saying she was going to call home to Florence and Tuscany and Milan and find out that she had a lot of relatives in those cities and finding out what they were putting in the focaccia. And she came back about a week or 2 weeks later, I'm not sure, and she said she had talked to about 3 or 4 different of her cousins in different cities, and some of the bakers were adding tomatoes, some of them were adding broccoli, some were adding potatoes. You can really change what ingredients you might like and change what you're making in order to put in the focaccia. I've added broccoli before, I've added potatoes. They're all good. People seem to like this combination with tomatoes and onion and herbs, so I've kind of, it's the main focaccia that I've made, but we change it a little bit with the amount of herbs and what's seasonal. Okay, the ingredients here are tomato, onion, basil, Italian parsley, and garlic. Put enough into the center of each one. Okay. Wet my hands. I'm going to need a pizza cutter, which I think that there's one in the sink behind you there. Under. Great. Thank you, Gary. I'll wipe that off. Okay. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is fold all the ingredients right up into a pocket. One end comes up, another end comes up, and it's going into the center. Wherever I see some of the ingredients, I'm just going to fold it right on around, and so I no longer see the ingredients. And I can, it's now sealed. The bottom, you can't see any holes there where the ingredients might be leaking out, and we'll let that rest. And so I'll do all 5 like that. Bring them in, bring them up. Reminds me of when I had children and I had to change diapers. Okay. The focaccia goes quite well with soup, salad, pasta. You can make sandwiches out of it. You can stuff them. You can add ingredients. It's a forerunner of the pizza, so you can add ingredients to the top after they're baked. You can add cheeses or pepperoni, mushrooms, whatever. They're so versatile. Okay, so we'll push that down. There's a couple of aluminum trays over on that rack right there, right behind you, Gary. There's silver ones, right. And then there's papers, Al, right behind you, right, one down. In there. You can put 2 papers to a tray, and I'll need 3 trays. So we'll let these rest for about 5 minutes, and I'll come back and cut them, and we'll put them on a tray. Let's see here. Paninis, let's see if they're, it may need to, yeah, this is all right. I was going to say, they might need to rest a little bit longer, but they're not ripping, so that it's good to kind of shape them out right now. And then you can kind of twist the ends. And so now you have that kind of a shape. Just a small bread. A little bit of air bubbles across the top there. Just flick your finger and knock the air out. Okay, we'll let these relax a little bit longer for the fougasse. I'll put a panini in the box here. Turn around. So these are going to rise slowly in a box. They'll be ready to go in the oven in about a half an hour. Ovens are hot. They're set at 425 degrees, 425. I've got one more.
What's the idea of cooking in the box versus the canvas plastic?
They both work. You know,
For one, I see some of the stuff you put in boxes, other stuff you don't necessarily.
primarily we'll shape the Italian and put the Italian in the boxes. And the sourdough French I usually put on boards and on the tree rack. It has to do with space in the bakery, for one. They both rise quite well at either place. So I have a dough under here, which I believe is ready to go as far as shaping a fougasse. A bit of parsley on my hand. A little flour underneath, a little flour above, a rolling pin to roll it out. Roll one direction, another direction, and one down the center. That way it's level. It's not thick in one place and thin in another. Now this is for people who like a lot of crust, and what you can do is to pick it up slightly so it's not sticking. Then take, you can use a pizza cutter or you can use a bench scraper, and then you score it like thus. You can put another design across the top if you like. You can change this, and then a little bit of cornmeal. Need a little bit more cornmeal. I can get it from back here. Okay, what you want to do is to fold the fougasse so you can get it up off the bench without it turning, opening and tearing the holes that you've created, and fold it in half and then in a quarter. And now you can pick it up and you can unfold it. And once you unfold it, now you can spread it out and open up those holes. And you can rise slowly. And you have a fougasse. Now the same idea after all these years is I'm going to cut the focaccia in the same kind of idea, but that's the beginning of the French method of just using plain dough and making a hard crusty bread, and it's a nice idea for dinner sometime if people want to have dinner and have something unusual as a centerpiece for bread. Okay, we're ready to shape the focaccia. They've rested long enough now, about 10-15 minutes. I'm going to press them out flat, toss them on a tray. I'll put 2 to a tray, depending on the size. Usually we make 2 sizes. This is a 1-pound size, and then we make a small one that's 10 ounces in weight as far as the Italian dough. And then we add our ingredients to that. All these will be the large size. And so I'm flattening it out. Then I'll take a pizza cutter, and I'm going to cut it 5 times. It could be 4 times. At 5 looks pretty good. I'm coming at an angle right now, and just going to make a fan shape. I'm just going right into the dough until I can cut through. I don't want to make a really long line. I just want to make a line just to cut through it. Once I cut through it, I'm going to grab the top, put my hands underneath, my fingers underneath, pull that apart into a teardrop shape. So as I work my way, I hold the dough and then spread it out. And then I can come back through and open it up so you can see what ingredients are inside the focaccia. This needs to be opened up a little more, this a little bit more. So now not only does it taste good, but it also looks pretty. This is before it's going in the oven, so it looks all right now, but it'll look much better once it comes out of the oven. And once I have these all shaped like this, what I'm going to do is to go through and brush extra virgin olive oil, which you get really good flavor from extra virgin oil, and brush it on top, and then I'll let them rise a little bit and then bake them in the oven, and when they come out of the oven I'll brush them one more time with olive oil and then put sea salt across the top of that lightly. When I first started I thought, well, maybe I won't salt them. People don't like salt that much, but then I started realizing that it's a food that people like, and it's so basic, oil and salt, that reminds me of potato chips in some ways, but you know, you need the salt to kind of cut through some of the oil, and it tastes so good to all of us. Everybody likes potato chips. Everybody likes focaccia. Okay. Once again, at an angle, and then straight on across the top, and then 2 going the other way at an angle. Open them up, teardrop shape, and then just come through with my fingers and open them a little bit further so you can see what ingredients are inside there.
Makes you tearing the dough a little bit, John?
No. Yeah, the dough's pretty good. Feels real good. One more. When I start to shape them out right now, I'm putting my hand in the center so that they don't rip or tear, and then moving them out along the edges to get it so that it's fairly flat. If they do start to rip and tear, this one is a little bit, I'm just going to leave it like it is. It's fine. You know, don't overwork it, and then it just becomes even rougher to work with. So now a little bit of olive oil. No oil or shortening inside the dough, just a little bit brush on the outside, so you get that a little extra flavor along with the herbs and the fresh ingredients. Tastes great, looks good. to shape the French, pull them out of the boxes. I'll pull all 3 out. Flatten them out. Fold them in half. Press down hard. Seal that edge, that bottom, where the seam is. Fold them in half again. And I'm not trying to stretch them out, you notice. All I'm doing is folding it in half, folding it in half again. And now I'm using my thumbs to press to seal it. And as I'm doing it, my hand is just slowly coaxing it in that direction. And now I'm going to roll it back and forth until I get it out to the length that I want. And so I'm not pulling and I'm not really pushing hard to stretch that out. It's just kind of rolling it back and forth, pushing down on the bench. And it's coming out by itself. So then I'll put it on to the board here. I'll get 3 to a board. Flatten it out. Fold it in half. Press down hard. Seal the seam. Fold it in half again. Seal it again. Use my thumbs to press along that bottom seam. Now, my hands are flat out, my fingers are out, and I'm pushing, just coaxing the dough, just pushing against the dough and the bench, but not hard. Just enough so that I'm applying pressure and moving it out. And so now it's out far enough to where I want it. Pick it up, put it on the board with cornmeal. Their final rise is going to be on the board. Then I'm going to score them with a lamb, which is a razor blade and a tool that holds the razor blade, and slide them in the oven with steam. Bake them right on the tiles. I have 6-inch unglazed clay tiles. Okay, it feels a little fat in this one end. I'll just work that in and let the rest of it go. And if it's this end, I'll just work that until, as I'm just looking at it, it's all about the same size. If it's too fat one end, just work that back and forth. If it's here, work it back and forth until finally it's one equal length. Cover it with canvas. Okay, we can let that one over on the tree rack. Let that one rise. Yes, please. Okay, now the rest of the dough that's in here is 1 pound Italians and 1.5 pound Italians. I'll pull these out and shape them, and then I'll put them back into the box with cornmeal. Now here the technique is to flip them over from the bottom, squeeze the air out, and roll them up. And that's what the dough should look like. Now I'm looking for the bottom of the seam, which is right here. And so now I'm squeezing the air out as I'm taking my hands and I'm working it toward the center. I want something, I don't want a French loaf which is long and narrow going that way. I want short and squat this way. So I'm working it back and forth, squeeze the center, the sides, coming into the center again, taking that air out as I'm slowly rolling it up. And now it's just a real light. I don't want to tear. I can see the dough is ripping just a little bit in there. It's kind of hard to see, but it's just a little. And then kind of fold the seam with my thumbs, push in the tips, and then just work it back and forth. So now I have an Italian loaf that it's going to double in volume. Then I'll slice it right down the middle and bake it on the tiles. A hearth-baked loaf. Back and forth, back and forth. The story about making this bread is I went back to Pennsylvania when I was, I don't know, it was late 70s, and there was an Italian gentleman who had a bakery there, and it was about 3 o'clock in the morning, and I've got my nose outside the glass window, and he invites me in Italian, and he has 2 Italian ladies working with him, and they offer me a cup of coffee, and I'm watching. And they're making all this Italian bread, and they have benches like this, and there's about 16 of them spread out all over the shop. And all these Italian loaves are on these benches. And so I watched that night, and then a year later we went back at Easter, and I did the same thing. I went, and this time I brought an apron along, and they invited me in, remembered who I was, and I'm having my cup of coffee, and they're doing their production, and all of a sudden I got up, put my apron on, and started to work with them. And so I could roll doughs with 2 hands, which they were only using 1, and they were kind of amazed at that. And then he, just by working with Mr. Mazziotti, I learned how to make the Italian dough, and that's the only kind of bread he made. And at the end of the night, he said, or early morning, he said, if you would have asked me, I had a lot of college students come out of Pittsburgh, and they asked to make the Italian bread. He said, I always said no. He said, you never ask. So I learned how to make the Italian bread. Okay, this one, you flatten them out. This is going to be the fougasse, same dough, much crustier. Yeast it though. The other one was sourdough, so this one is going to be yeasted, and it has some crust from being underneath the canvas. I'll flip that over on the bottom, and I'll roll this out. And right now I'll put these in the boxes. Let's see, a little bit of cornmeal. Mr. Mazziotti was inspiring. He worked in a steel mill the first 12 or 13 years he was here from Italy, and he said the American bread was just soft and you know, you could wad it up, and he just didn't like the bread at all, and he wanted to make good Italian bread. So he got the idea that if he worked long enough, and he could open a bakery in his garage. So he tried doing that, and people wouldn't buy bread from him because it was in the garage. So then he worked all the overtime they could give him and saved enough money, and he tore down the garage and built this beautiful bakery. Just marble floors, white tiles on the side, wooden benches all spread out, and a hearth that he made, him and a mason, that was round and about half the size of this room, which is probably 12 by 12. And he had 4 gas jets coming in for his ovens, and just made beautiful bread. And I thought, if this man can do this, why can't I, who I'm an American, born and raised in this country, there's no reason why I can't open a bakery. So that kind of inspired me. Okay, rolling pin. Little flour. With this fougasse, you can make trees, you can make ladders. The ladder would be like this. Trim some of the dough off. Same idea. Pull them out, stretch. Different shapes. Okay, so we'll put the cornmeal on here and put these in the oven. Okay, cut. Okay, right now the Italian hard rolls have doubled in size, volume, and I'm going to place them on a baker's peel, which is just a wooden paddle. And as we place them on the peel, we give them a little space. And then this is called a lamb, which is a razor blade. You could use a single edge razor blade and just hold it in your hand, or this is a tool to hold it. And then what I'm going to do is lightly cut each one of those hard rolls. And then I'm going to slide it into the oven, and I'm going to spray water into the oven initially in order to get steam and cause the crust to get shiny and in a thin crust, and also to open up where the cut is. And then they'll bake in a dry oven the rest of the way. Okay, the Italian paninis, small loaves, are ready to go into the oven, so we're going to take them out of the box after they've proofed there and place them on these peels. And then after placing them on the peels, I'll take the lamb and lightly score, and I'm only about 20 degrees off, and I'm trying to get right underneath the top of the skin when I slice into these. So I have a real sharp blade, and I'm just sliding slowly right underneath the skin. You don't want to come up head on like that. It'll open the cut, but it looks much more attractive if it's just slightly right underneath the skin. Okay. Okay, into the oven. Okay, this is a French milk dough, and it's very versatile. It's a great dough to learn how to do many things from. It rises real slow for 5.5 to 8 hours, or even overnight. Develops a lot of flavor because of the length of time that it's rising. What I'm planning on making is challah out of this dough, so I'll scale off a few pieces here, and they're weighing 13 ounces. I need 2 to make a 2-strand braid, so I'll cut some of the dough here. Let's see what we got. Oh, right on. Okay. Cut a little of that off. So I'll make 2 challah. And I'll also make a 1-strand, which I'll show you how to. So I've got 1 strand. I'll start to shape them out. I'll roll them just to get them started out, and then let them relax. Also out of this dough, I'm going to do country white, so I can, those 2 bread pans off to the side, I'll cut them at 1.5, 1 pound, 5 ounces, and then we'll make a regular white loaf, but it's a wonderful white loaf. It's got so much flavor to it. Great for toast. Okay, so those are setting a little bit. Now I'll cut out the 1.5, 2 pieces. Let's see, change my scale. 1 pound, 5 ounces. Okay, so now these 2, I've oiled my pans. I'm going to flatten the dough out, fold it over a third, lift it up, and then slowly take it a third and round it right on up, and then drop it in the bread pans. Okay. Now the other thing, I'll put some of this dough back for right now over here. The other thing I'm going to do, I'll move my scale, is to make apple rolls. And what I'm going to do is flour the bench and put a little bit of flour on the bench, flatten the dough out. this. Roll it out kind of thin. Flour again. I have egg wash that I have in a container here. It was just a little bit of eggs beaten up pretty thick, and then add a little water to the egg and to thin it out.
You are approaching
Egg wash.
you are approaching with the egg wash ingredient.
Okay. Now, okay, I'm going to apply a thin coating of egg wash to seal the dough along the bottom. Now what I'm going to do is, we're using local apples, and there's Northern Spies and Ida Reds and a Golden Delicious in this mixture. And what we do is cut them up and then add a little bit of brown sugar, some fresh cinnamon, and fresh nutmeg across the top, and a little bit of butter. And then we bake them in the oven for 45 minutes at a low temperature, right around 300, 325. Bring them out, let them cool, and then now we're going to put them across this dough, and it's similar to apple pie, only thing it's a bread. Alsatian apple rolls. So. Set those aside. Need to get something to wipe my hands. Okay, now I'm going to roll it up. What I'll do is to start on the one end. I can either start from either end. I'll start from right here and turn it, and it's just like cinnamon rolls, and you roll it up. And what I'm doing is taking my thumbs again and pressing against the dough, stretching it and pulling as I roll it. That keeps it tight. And then rolling this dough right on up. And then it gets to the bottom. You keep your seam down, so the weight is sealing it right now. And out of that, then we're going to take a knife and score across the top. So from that piece, I've got 4 loaves. I need a tray, Gary, with clean paper. So now what I'll do is I'll egg wash again. I'll bring them back into focus here. Bring them all right here. Okay, thank you. Okay, well. Okay, now I'm going to take the egg wash across the top, and then what I'll do is do along the edges and the side. That's going to give it a nice glaze and a shine. And then what I'm going to do is to take coarse white sugar and sprinkle across the top. Coarse white sugar, and just a little bit across there, just for decorative looks, and tastes pretty good too. A little sweet. Now this dessert is, as far as bread goes, is sweet, but it's not overly sweet. There's very little sugar in it. And then what it will do is score across the top. Move it a little bit more here with this knife, and this will cause it to open up and allow some of that heat to vent out. And then we'll let them rise for about 40-45 minutes, and then bake them off in a 325-degree oven for about 40 minutes. Okay. So now I need to clean the bench a little bit, and I'll shape the challah. Gary, you want to take this and then cover it, and you can put it up high on a rack. And then I need another tray again and to put the challah on. A little bit of flour on the bench. Okay, this is a single strand braid. What you do is you have one strand and you'll bring it around and make a loop. So now really what you have is one strand, two strand, three strand. You'll feed this through. You twist the dough. You feed it back through this way. Twist the dough again. Feed it back through. And now you have one strand making a braid. Now what I'll do is do a two-strand braid. And what you do is to bring both strands out. And what's nice about this braid is that it's as high as actually putting the dough in a loaf pan. And it's free form, so it looks pretty and being a braid. Okay, let's see here. Okay, once you have both strands out about the same, this one needs to come out a little bit longer. Okay, now what you do is you cross over the strand, and then, now my right hand is going to go under my left hand, and I'm going to drop. My right hand is going to go under my left hand, and the braid's going to go that way. I don't have to think about it. My right hand under, left hand, right hand, left hand. And you have two strands being formed to make a braid. Now when you get to the end, you mash all four strands together and then tuck them underneath here. There's no way that this one where it starts from is going to come loose, and then this one is tucked in enough so that no ends are going to come undone. So that's a two-strand. I'll do it one more time. Okay, both strands are about the same. You toss the one over top of the other so it's now a crosses form. Right hand's going to go under the left hand. Right hand, left hand. And so if you were looking this way, right hand is under, left hand is over the top. Same ways. You always do it the same. So all the four ends are together. You push them together, tuck it underneath. Two strands. A tray. Great. Thank you. Okay. Also, the two loaves that we put in bread pans will, matter of fact, this could go in a bread pan too. Now that I think about it, it would look nice to have some form to it. So I'll put both those on here. Now, egg wash them, and then you could either put poppy seeds or sesame seeds, or you can leave them plain across the top. Now the other pieces of dough that I have in here, you can make small rolls out of it. Same dough, country white and milk, the French milk dough. Okay. What you can do is if you have a special occasion and you want to have a special roll. These are small petite rolls. You can cut them in half, the small pieces, and then roll them back and forth to make small braids. You could do the same thing as you did with the larger ones there. Cross them over and just make miniature versions of the same. Leave it there. The other thing is you can round them up, making small dinner rolls out of them. You can shape them like a regular loaf, like this. Let them rise. Then you can take scissors, dip the scissors in water, the tips of them. And then after they double in size, you snip sideways with the scissors, and they open up, different shape. The other thing you can do is to make a long strand and then make a roll where you bring the two strands together like this. Twist once, twist twice, then fold this tip in through the middle and force it out, and then push it down. And the same thing, you can egg wash the tops of these. You can add caraway, you could add cumin, you can add sesame, poppy seeds. Would you hand me some sesame seeds? There should be some right in one of those containers there, or the poppy too, whatever. You can make a pretzel shape, twisting like that, making the loop. Thank you. And then bringing both ends up, and you just pull it apart. Oh. Okay. Okay. Sorry. A little bit of sesame seeds on top. A little bit of poppy seed. We'll set these aside here. Add the rolls. Same idea, a little bit of egg wash. Then after they rise a little bit, we'll score some of the breads there. Move these aside. Okay, the other thing besides the breads, the rolls, the apple rolls, you can take the same dough and you can make, I'll need one more tray, Gary. You can roll a piece of dough out like this. I'll flour the bench again. Take another piece here. There we go.
Now, excuse me, I'll just cover, we'll just stick to this.
Cover it over with the plastic. Okay, in the morning you you need something, you have guests coming over and you need to make a breakfast roll. You can take the same dough, roll it out. It's been rising in your cooler overnight, and so now you roll the piece of dough out, and it's long enough. And what you're going to make is something called snails, which are cinnamon, butter, and pecans. And so you roll it out fairly thin. Then egg wash the whole dough. If they want to, yeah. Okay, and then we need cinnamon, which I have back here. Shake it. Okay, this is cinnamon and sugar. 1 part sugar, 1 part cinnamon I'm sprinkling on here. Sweet rolls, you can fill them with raspberries, strawberries. I'm using cinnamon and butter and then sprinkling pecans across the top. A fancy cinnamon roll. Okay, so now I've got my piece of dough out. I'm going to roll it back and forth to stretch it out a bit. Once I do, I now twist it, roll it up loosely, pinch the end. I'll fill that tray and then we'll put the topping on top of the snails. Okay, that's enough here. We'll just set these aside. Then what we'll do is brush the top with egg wash. Give them a color and a little shine to them. So with this French milk dough, we're getting small rolls, the country white bread, the challah. You're getting rolls for in the morning, the snails. Pinch that end back. Also, right after this, I'll do the New Yorkers, which are a fresh onion roll out of the same dough. And they make great sandwiches. Okay, we'll put a little cinnamon butter across the top. Okay, and now the pecans, all chopped up, or halves and wholes. Okay, voila. I need one more tray. Okay, 2 pieces of dough together, weighs about 4 ounces. And then I have onions and olive oil, poppy seed cut up, a little bit of scallions and red purple onions. So what we'll do is to take some of this, you can take the whole dough and push it down in there, fold it up, and then make a small roll. And then just roll it up. Flatten it out. These go real well because there's butter in this dough that after they come out of the oven they're wonderful, but then the butter has a tendency to toughen the dough for a little bit, and then if you can reheat them, slice them in half and lightly grill them on the stove. You can stuff them with turkey, or you can make a hamburger out and put on them
Basically, they're just such an excellent flavor roll that you can do many versatile things with it. Then what we'll do is we'll cover them, we'll let them rise, and then we'll egg wash them after they've doubled in size, and then put the same mixture across the top. And then we put them in the oven for about 20 minutes and let them bake at 375. I'm getting ready to put the fougasse in the oven and bake it right on the tile. Slide it right in. The oven's about 450. Close it up. Spray it with a little bit of water, create a mist. Okay, now we're getting ready to pull the panini and the French. A couple of Italian. The Italian's coming out. Nice looking Italian. These are a couple small panini. There we go, put those in a basket. Nice, hard, crusty bread. The French coming out. Okay. We'll take a look at this oven. We'll pull out sourdough French, 2-pound round. Slide that down low. And another one coming out. Baguettes. Look nice. The way they're cut. Sourdough French, 1-pounders. Nice looking loaves. I think it's been a successful baking day.